Tobago. Yes, viewers. So we are discussing this morning, just the developments where the ferry situation is concerned, particularly the Cabo ferry, and we know that the MV Dora is now back. Yes, I got it wrong again. Now back in Trinidad, now in Trinidad and Tobago, not back, but now in Trinidad and Tobago, and hopefully we should see that vessel being put into service very soon. Of course, it needs the necessary certification before it can operate commercially in Trinidad and Tobago, and that's just the laws of the land. And hopefully we can see some relief. It wouldn't be the full relief we're looking for, but it should be something to carry us over. So joining on set with me this morning to speak to those issues is none other than Senator Laurence Hislop. So a special good morning and welcome to you. How are you doing this morning?
Kandace. I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. I am not going to try and pronounce the name of the vessel.
Yes, and we see that you're all dressed and you're ready because this morning we have the ceremonial opening of Parliament to take place in just a few hours.
Yes. Yes, we should be done. I think we started, we are starting at 1:30.
Yes.
So this is the beginning, this is the start of the fourth session of the 11th Parliament.
And I want to get your take on this whole matter, the fact that we are in this position again, unfortunately. I have to say again, because we were here in 2017. Now, granted that this situation is not quite as bad as 2017, but it is very reminiscent of that situation where the transport of cargo goods between the island is interrupted.
Well, it's unfortunate because we faced a situation in the country, on the island, where we had an incident, a tragic, well, horrific incident that couldn't have been worse if that was not managed. We had an incident on the cargo vessel where we had a fire, and so we had a situation where the vessel is out of service. But I want to remind Tobagonians that when you look at what is available, remind the country what is available, we are still able to move people and cargo between the two islands. I think 2017 was worse because we had a challenge with even our passenger ferries.
Yes.
But when you look at the capacity that is available today in 2023, we are still able to move significant cargo between the two islands.
Of course, but still not quite. I mean, what's happening right now, it's still not good enough for what the business community requires, because on the passenger ferries we can only take 3-ton trucks.
Right.
A lot of the trucks that come up to Tobago on a regular are larger trucks.
Yes.
So now our business community are forced with having to try to find smaller trucks, try to figure out how you manipulating your goods and so on for it to come up, and then you don't even know if it's going to come up because it's being screened at the port, and the officials there make the determination as to which goods is essentially enough to bring over.
But that's expected under the circumstances because this wasn't planned. And persons have to also remember that without the capacity of even 3-ton trucks, there will be absolutely nothing to move between the islands. I made this analogy to somebody recently. The vessel that has come as a stopgap is not ideal. And nobody's saying that it is ideal, but under the circumstances, it is a stopgap measure that can be used. And I use the analogy that if you're accustomed driving, and I wouldn't use the exact analogy that I use with the person. If you're accustomed moving a 10-ton truck or a 10-wheeler and something happens to it, and somebody gives you the opportunity, say, hey, listen, I know this is a situation, but I'll give you a 3-ton truck in the meantime. It means that you can still move your goods. You would not be able to move the majority that you would like to move, but something will still happen. And the analogy that I used to somebody when they complained about this new vessel, I said, if you're accustomed driving a BMW and something happens to it, and the company gives you a B14 to drive in the meantime until the BMW is fixed, are you saying to me that you wouldn't drive the BMW because somebody says we should have just remained with the existing capacity how we have been going for the 2 weeks? Well, and I think the last 2 weeks, as much as goods were coming to Tobago, anything in addition to what has been coming is a benefit. So this vessel, as much as it may not be the ideal thing, it still gives the the hardwares to be able to bring significant construction material, blocks and steel and so on, as well as the containerize the cargo, because there are businesses that depend on, let's say for instance, your feed depots. I know the largest feed depot on the island usually transports his feed via containers, and so he's at a point where he has to be limited in terms of bringing it on trucks. He's not able to bring the volume, and if you have a vessel now for 10 days that could bring the containers until the Cabo Star comes back into service, I think that's additional capacity.
But that's still to come on stream because as it is right now, that vessel is not yet able to do that because it requires a certification.
Right.
But we didn't need to be here because back in 2017, when the situation came about, there was a plan. We get 2 new additional ferries that was specially built. Of course, it took a few years to build,
Right,
as
the passenger
natural
ferries.
as it is. But there was also the promise of we needed to have a cargo ferry because we contracted the Cabo Star. It was a 2-year arrangement,
Right.
and there was a provision for additional year. And then that contract just kept getting renewed, and it was no conversation about a specially built cargo ferry as was promised for Tobago.
So let me ask you something, Kandace. Even if we had a specially built cargo ferry for Tobago and something happened to the ferry, we would have been in the same position.
No, we would not. No, Mr. Because
Yes.
that's why we had the TNT Spirit. Because the TNT Spirit was supposed to be the backup, and the TNT Spirit can actually take larger trucks. So had the TNT Spirit not been done right now, we would have been able to.
No, Kandace.
No. This was the explanation that was given because I was a part of the talks back then. This was the assurances given from the government at that point in time that we would have the TNT Spirit as that backup vessel.
But
And this is what the business community
but
said
the
as well.
TNT Spirit has always been a passenger ferry, and it would have the same weight restriction.
Not necessarily, because the
Candace, hold on.
TNT Spirit can actually take larger trucks
Hold
as
on,
opposed to
hold
the
on,
2 new ferries that
hold
we
on.
have right now.
But the TNT
But these are
Spirit,
facts.
hold on. The TNT Spirit will still not be able to take trucks the capacity that a cargo vessel can.
Well, it would not be, but it would still
the-
be better than what we have right now.
Candace, we're dealing with what we have. And I'm saying to you that even if we had a purpose-built cargo ferry, because I hear the argument that if the Tobago House of Assembly was in charge of the ports, we wouldn't be in this situation. The reality is that this was an unpredictable situation.
But that's why you have a contingency plan.
Right, so
and the TNT Spirit was supposed to be the contingency plan, but it continues to be under repair.
The TNT Spirit cannot be your full contingency plan for cargo. Simply the fact that the TNT Spirit as well is unable to pull your containerized cargo.
Yeah, because right now it's down.
No, even if it was in service, Kandace, it could not pull your containerized cargo because you can't pull the flatbeds onto the TNT Spirit. You see, you have the same. Yes, the TNT Spirit may be able to carry, and I'm saying based on what you just said, slightly larger trucks than the Boku Reef and maybe the APT James. But you can't compare what a cargo vessel, the capacity of the Cabo Star, is able to pull versus what your aluminum hull, smaller fast ferries would be able to pull. You can't compare that.
So where are we now in terms of, let's say, getting that TNT Spirit back on stream, so that just in case we have another situation like this, we don't have to wait for a vessel to come from Venezuela?
Well, and you make that vessel coming from Venezuela sound as something really terrible. The reality we have to face is that vessels aren't, this is not a rental company. Vessels aren't cars. So when a vessel breaks down to the position that the Cabo Star was broken down, you can't expect that you'll pick up the phone in the morning and call a rental company and say, I need a vessel. So it was what was available in a short space of time that could have done what you require. It's not exactly what you want, because obviously it's a smaller vessel, it's a different configuration. But I'm going back to the point that you're still able to pull your containerized cargo as well as loose construction material, and you will continue to pull your food stuff on your passenger ferries. So I can't speak to when the TNT Spirit will be back in service. That's a consideration or question you'll have to pose to the line minister. What I know is that in terms of the repair of the TNT Spirit, it requires the dry docking service at Chaguaramas and so on. And that is being treated with as soon as possible so that we can service our own ferries in Trinidad and Tobago as we have accustomed to over the years.
Now, the Port Authority also last week, when I had a conversation with them, they told us that they don't have a strong Tobago representation on the board. And that was something coming out of the 2017 situation, that there were assurances from the government. And when asked, Mr. Lyle Alexander could say that he has no power over that power lies with the minister. So what is your role in advocating so that we have the necessary representation on these boards that are so crucial to the way we live here in Tobago?
Well, neither do I have the power. Just as Mr. Alexander, I don't have the power to determine who sits on our board. But this is where our leaders in Tobago ought to have the required conversations with ministers in Trinidad to say to them, listen, this is what we would like to see happen. Make representation. That's why you are the leaders of the Tobago House of Assembly. That's why you're the leaders of Tobago. Make representation for a greater seat at the table, at the discussion. But I want to go back to the point that whether or not you had 10 people sitting on the board from Tobago, if you had a situation where your main cargo ferry has a catastrophic incident, you are going to have reduced capacity. You can't compare 900 trucks or 400 trucks that the Cabo Star is able to carry. 400 trucks at undetermined weight or weight that you have no limit, unlimited weight. You can't compare that to other ferries that you may bring into the space. You definitely lost capacity, and I still want to compliment the workers at the port and even the management at the port. I may not have agreed with how they spoke to the public at the press conference, but I want to compliment the port for the level of work that they've put in, the staff and the management, to make sure that we still have goods and services moving between Trinidad and Tobago.
All right, well, we're going to take a pause right there and go to a quick break, and we'll be back right after this.
Dawning as the passion start to rise, the energy fill the skies. Tobago updates. Na, 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 na. Good morning, Tobago. Na, 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 na. Wake up with Kandace and Denise. Let's go. It's a brand new morning, rise up to a brand new dawn.
Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Well, viewers, before we went to the break, we were just discussing with Senator Laurence Hislop, the Honorable Mrs. Senator Laurence Hislop, and we were speaking about, having more representation of Tobago on the boards and so on. And Mrs. Hislop said that it should be for the THA to make that representation, or to petition, have the conversations to allow them to have a greater seat on the board, on those boards. Now, I want to ask you, Senator Hislop, is advocating for Tobago, greater Tobago representation on a board such as the Port Authority. Is that something that you do?
That's a conversation I could have. That's a conversation I could have with a senatorial colleague. That maybe what we need to look at is, instead of one or two, you have 3 representatives on the board from Tobago. That's
so are you going to do that, or is that something
that's a conversation that can happen, Kandace? All I'm saying is
so you're not committing to it?
No, hold on. I've never said that I'm not committing to it. What I'm saying, outside of even my representation, we have elected officials in Tobago with the responsibility that can have a conversation. The same conversation I am having with the minister, that conversation can happen from a chief secretary standpoint, or even a secretary of transport can have a conversation with the minister to say, listen, minister, we want to have a greater say in the decision making as it relates. And bear this in mind, that the Port Authority is not only responsible, the Port Authority Board is not only responsible for the inter-island transport. The Port Authority Board is responsible for the entire management of the port. We have to remember that some of the key people on the port operations between both Trinidad and Tobago are Tobagonians.
Yes,
right?
certainly.
And that is why I said we ought to complement the port for what it has done in a situation that was unexpected.
So, and I mean, and they did admit that they did their best, but they also said that there's only so much they can do, and the rest of it is for the minister to do, or the minister to allow in terms of funding, to allow, the repairs that are necessary on the TNT Spirit, as well as fixes for the ticket system.
Right.
Because I'm not too sure if you are aware, you can't book advance on the ferries.
Well, the reality is everything in the country requires funding at some point. And yes, the ministers are responsible for that. But I also think that based on what resources we have, I heard somebody say recently that the ferry service is extremely inefficient. And I want to debunk that. I want to say that over the last 5 to 6 years, the port, let's talk after 2017, and let's talk about the level of efficiency that we've had on the inter-island ferry service. We have had more up times than down times on the port. The only time we complain about the port is when something breaks, But we don't compliment the port when it's working. We don't compliment when the ferries are basically, we have more capacity than we need in a lot of instances. We don't say that. We don't say those things that outside of our peak travel, that the ferries run practically empty, but the ferries still run. We don't talk those things. We have become a people that are ready to complain when something doesn't work as effectively as we would like it to work. When at some point in time, we have to understand that, or we should give kudos. We should give credit where credit is due. You're talking about a cargo vessel that runs clockwork every night, has capacity that sometimes is not even, that most times is not even used fully. The
So
inter-island ferries, the passenger ferries that leave clockwork at 6:30 and 8:30 and sometimes run without full capacity.
I've noticed this languaging and this narrative coming from central government as that, because there are sometimes, it's not all the capacity is not used, whether it's on the air bridge or the Seabridge. It's almost used as an excuse to say, hey, we're working well. I mean, you don't need to complain as much. But the reality is that when you speak to people whose lives are basically on these ferries, that they go back and forth all the time. The truckers, for instance, I mean, I'm not sure if you've actually spoken to the truckers, but I've spoken to them quite a lot over the past few years. And what they go through is not easy at all.
So Kandace, what I could tell you, at one point in time, I had a triton that used to do inter-island transport, right? I am affiliated to a company that transports material on the boat almost every night. So I'm fully aware of what happens on the port, right? In terms of the transportation of goods. But I'm saying to you that 95% of the time, or even more, I'm sure if you check the stats, the efficiency of the inter-island service is, we in Trinidad and Tobago have grown so accustomed to a service that is, when you look throughout the Caribbean, that there are other islands that cannot boast about 2 fast ferry services that run simultaneously, right? We talk, the cargo capacity as well. You go to other islands, sometimes the ferry travels once a week. Sometimes the ferry travels once a week in these places. And it's because of, there are varied reasons, and sometimes you can't make the comparison. But all I'm saying to us as a people is, when you look at how much uptime you have on your inter-island Seabridge as compared to your downtime, I think the uptime far exceeds the uptime far exceeds the downtime.
So what should Tobagoans think now? I mean, we're at a situation here. We see a lot of the grocery stores, a lot of people are complaining that, the stocks are really low and the impact that that's having on the economy. I mean, the business sector, they are really stressed right now. This whole situation has frustrated them. and it is making the business difficult. So, when we want to try to bolster our private sector, it seems as though they continually taking hit after hit after hit that prevents them really from being as successful as they can be. So what should be the reactions
But
now?
but the reality for me, I live here. So I experience this. I've worked in certain sectors that have been intimately involved with the entire land transport. And so I get it and I understand it and I feel it, right? But and I shouldn't say but, in addition to that, what we have to look at is how can we create capacity on the island so that we are not as, quote unquote, so dependent on a truck moving from Trinidad every day in order for us to get goods. And if by half week, if we don't have that service, we start in the crisis. What we have to look at from a business perspective and even as well from a political perspective is how do we then build capacity on the island? Not only capacity to create goods and services here, but also to store, to create capacity for storage, to create capacity in the event of something. Because we have to look beyond a situation with a boat. Let's say, for instance, God forbid, we have a natural disaster and we cut off from Trinidad or from the rest of the world. How then do we take care of ourselves for a period of time until services can be reestablished? And so we have to look at, and one of the things that I felt that's required as well is for the business community to come together and to create greater storage capacity. I know warehousing is a cost, right? But create greater storage capacity on island, which would then cause you to increase your haulage capacity, so that instead of moving 5 trucks every night of one capacity, you may be able to move 2 trucks every night at a larger capacity because you have storage, and not a situation where we just bring over goods for them to roll out of our warehouses by the next day. And so we always have that revolving door that we keep just moving trucks back and forth on the port.
Certainly. All right. Well, viewers, I want to thank you so much, Senator Laurence Hislop, because you got to go on your way to Trinidad
Yeah,
now to represent us in Parliament as we open the new session of Parliament. So I want to thank you for being on with us and having this conversation with me.
no problem. Thank
All
you.
right, viewers. So please don't go anywhere because we got a lot more coming up for you after the break.
Passion starter.